I'm stoked to have you on the show.
Yeah, I'm super excited to continue the conversation. The first one was really fun.
You are now entering preFORM, Prepare to Perform, a podcast created to explore the inner workings of high-profile performers. Conversations reveal what separates them from the average human. Buckle up. My next guest is truly one of a kind. He's the director of meditation training at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His role encompasses a hands-on partnership with the university's athletic department, overseeing the education, integration, and facilitation of mindfulness and meditation for the coaches, staff, and student athletes. Throughout his career, he's collaborated with leading experts in the research and edification of cognitive well-being. His experience involves the design and implementation of mindfulness courses at the Center for Healthy Minds, Healthy Mind Innovations, and the University of Wisconsin Health Mindfulness Program. Our conversation begins with how it all started. Please welcome Chad McGehee to preFORM.
I mean, just to be like totally transparent, like off the bat with you and the listeners, like, so for me, I first came to mindfulness and meditation out of challenge and suffering in my own life. And I had a sense that I could either run from it, I could hide from it, or I could turn toward it. And I didn't know how to do that. So that put me on a path to try to figure out how to do that. And it was really when I started to dig deeper into mindfulness and meditation, both the training and the kind of frameworks that support the training, that I felt a resonance, like, oh, there's something here, right? Like this really speaks to me, but also wakes something up in me, that kind of that quiver. So then I just followed it, right? And it was a huge support for me, dealing with that suffering, that challenge. And then at a certain point, I was like, you know what? I got to see if there's a way I can start to maybe share some of this with other people. So I've done it with a wide range of folks. I used to be a public school teacher, so I've done it in that context. And then one thing led to another, and now I get to spend most of my time doing this work with folks in elite performing environments, athletes, SWAT teams, corporate groups, those sorts of people.
Those early days, Chad, where you're at this intersection of understanding the value you're having in the practice itself with yourself and realizing this is probably beneficial for others. What was that like, taking that state of uncomfortable feeling of you're learning it yourself, you're trying to train it, but you're unsure perhaps of who will even resonate with it, because it more or less, from my understanding, it found you, or you found it, or the universe was just on the path. But what was that like, those early days of interfacing with other, so to speak, clients, if you will, and here you are as a grasshopper, but you're trying to train other grasshoppers? I mean, what was that like for you?
So I had an unbelievable amount of hesitance to teach anybody anything around these practices, and I think some of that was around the awareness of my own, as you say, grasshopper status, right? Like I'm pretty at that point, especially like very early on the journey. I mean, I'd probably been practicing for 7 or 8 years by the time I kind of first taught those first public school first graders, to do a little practice, or my elementary school colleagues. And also, I think, and this is still true for me, I have such respect for the teachers who I look up to, the Sharon Salzbergs of the world, the Jack Cornfields of the world, that in my mind at that point on the journey, I was like, well, if you want to learn about meditation, like go listen to them, like
Mm,
go, read Thich Nhat Hanh's book. Like you
yeah.
don't need to listen to Chad, like this dude, hanging out, and but then I also but I wanted also there was benefit and people weren't reaching those resources. So I thought maybe I could be an intermediary, a conduit, a support for those people. And so that still very much drives what I'm doing, with in these performance environments. The fact is that, meditation hasn't made its way, especially rigorous quality meditation hasn't made its way into these environments. And so if I can be somewhat of a bridge to introduce these concepts and practices in these environments in a way that retains the rigor so that it doesn't become this McMindfulness thing, then I feel I both have a responsibility to do that, to benefit others, but also a responsibility to the path, to the lineage, that these practices are built on.
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, you've been exposed to, when you talk about the rigor, University and the Center for Healthy Minds, which for the listeners is a top tier organization that's not only facilitating these practices, but also diving deep into the empirical evidence behind it. What was that like for you when you went into this space and learning from the best of the best, but also being exposed to laymen coming in as participants and scanning brains and seeing shifts occur within these practices?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when I think about like the work and how it shows up for me, there's kind of like rigorous meditation practice. There's thousands of years of tradition, and there's like the personal practice, going on retreat, like everything that makes like a solid practitioner sort of thing.
Hmm.
And then there's kind of the rigorous science, like you're saying, and being based at the Center for Healthy Minds for 6 years, and I still have this faculty like affiliation there, has been unbelievable. I mean, and first for me, it was straight dream come true stuff, right? I mean, there's very few places in the world where you can get a salary job as a meditation teacher. There's just not a whole bunch of those around.
Well
and,
said.
and so the fact that I could do that was unbelievable. And then to be able to, and Ford, I know you've experienced this, and I'm sure listeners have too, like to find other people who get so fired up and excited about rigorous meditation training is such a gift. I remember at one point my wife telling me, like, hey Chad, I'm really glad that you're so excited about this mindfulness and meditation stuff, and you need to find other people to talk to about it. Right? So
Spoken like a solid partner.
totally, she's a great teacher for me in so many ways. And so being there and being able to talk with folks like Richie Davidson and Cortland Dahl and Matt Hirschberg and Dan Gruppe and these leading scientists was such a gift. And also for me to really understand, so to speak, the sausage making of science. That was really, really helpful as a non-scientist to get in there and see kind of how rigorous science gets done, how experimental designs are created, like all the processes that go into place. And now that's hugely informs me, because I think one of the things that happens in this industry, if you will, of mindfulness and meditation is there's a lot of wildly exaggerated claims on the benefits of these practices, that people will take just a kernel of the scientific evidence and make, robust claims guaranteeing the impacts. And that's just not true. I mean, there's a lot of reason to be excited. There's a lot of really powerful, insights coming out of the research, and there's a lot that we don't know. So being able to be there and still collaborate with those folks has been a huge gift for me to kind of be grounded and comfortable in the scientific literature around mindfulness and meditation.
How was that experience impactful on your current training, your current position as a practitioner, but also as a trainer for these young minds? How did that rigor affect that for you? Because let's say hypothetically you didn't have that. Where would you be, right? I mean, you may be in the same seat you're in now, but what was that like for you as far as giving you now a different perspective, but also different skill set and tools to apply right now in this moment?
Yeah, I think it's impacted things in many ways, and I don't think I would be where I am right now doing the work that I'm doing without that experience. And I think there's a variety of reasons why that is. So one, I think a lot of people, especially in these high performing, high intensity elite environments, when they hear mindfulness and meditation, it comes with a lot of baggage. It's woo woo, hippy dippy, like that sort of connotation comes up. And so once they understand, oh, like this guy and this work is grounded in rigorous science, that opens them up a little bit to get a
Right.
little bit of curiosity. And then we kind of can build the trainings around, what do we know scientifically? So, we know scientifically a lot around training attention. And so that's a foundational skill that any elite performer is going to be interested in, is having your attention be where you want it to be and not dependent just on external circumstances. So both kind of opens the door, but it also informs me on how I create curriculum and what's the content that I'm drawing from, and what do we know scientifically about training the mind in these ways. And we have this backlog that happens in research that you know about, and I'm sure many of your listeners do, but it's like 7 to 10 years typically for something to go from intervention to actually impacting people in the real world. And I'm excited to speed that process up, to be able to be in the conversations around the scientific literature, collaborate with folks that are submitting the IRBs and publishing papers. But I'm the one who gets to go out this afternoon and meet with 3 different teams here at the University of Wisconsin. So we can, build that process and make it go quicker so that people are benefiting now.
Oh, it's really well said. And as we both know, timing is everything. We fast forward now, you're working with these athletes, as you mentioned, you have the opportunity to speak to 3 different teams. The start of this career path for you, what was the response like from these student athletes when Chad rolls up, he has a title, coaching staff explains who he is, why he's here? Did you have some heads kind of turn, or did you have complete buy-in at the jump?
So I think one of the things that we did was, it was a real slowly developing operation that we've had over here. It didn't start as a full-time position at the University of Wisconsin. It started in a very small project with a group of retired NFL guys, not even connected to the University of Wisconsin. And a bunch of those guys went to Wisconsin. And they went through this 8-week training, and definitely a bunch of them showed up with some serious skepticism, right? Right. Like I played in the league for 7 years. You're going to talk to me about what?
Yeah.
Like,
What do you know?
like meditation. And there was a guy who had played in the league, played at Wisconsin, who was interested in these practices. And he and I kind of came up with this idea together to do this training, and they trusted him, right? He had been on the inside. He had performed at these levels. So he was a conduit to kind of get them into the room. And then once they got into the room, and they saw, oh, this is rigorous, kind of like what we were talking about before. This is based on science. And then really, I mean, this was a huge insight for me, but continues with current athletes, is these elite performers, these elite athletes are some of the best in the world at training. And typically they're training their bodies. So when they understand that this is training the mind, and the way I think about the work is strength conditioning for the mind, then they say, I get it. That makes sense to me. I'm used to repetition. I'm used to fractional advantages. And they're looking for those little things that can make a difference. And so some of those guys that were in that NFL pilot, some of them still on staff at Wisconsin, and they were the ones that first invited it into the athletic department. Say, hey, Chad, would you come talk to the football team? Would you be interested in working, with our men's basketball team? So we had these internal champions who had experienced the benefit themselves. So the coaches weren't buying the idea of mindfulness and meditation. They had experienced the benefits themselves. And that, I think, made all the difference in the world, allowing us to build a program from the inside. So then the head strength coach for football was giving me time out of his strength conditioning schedule to do meditation training with the team. That wouldn't have happened had he not had that experience himself. Right. And then it slowly grew over a couple of years, eventually into this full-time position.
What are some of the challenges, though, that you faced along the way? I mean, it can't all be sunshine and rainbows, right? Let's get serious for a second. I know there's some struggles within these spaces. If you could share some of them with the listeners, and perhaps even some remedies or some resources for people that are interested in going down a path like yourself, to expose themselves early to perhaps avoid those challenges.
Yeah, it's definitely not all sunshine and rainbows. So I think one of the things, I mean, there's so many things that are probably really important, especially for folks that are interested in doing this. And I know it's been and continues to be really important for me, is it's really easy, I think, for many of us to think that we've got the solutions that can benefit other people. Like we have something that's really special and we know the best way to do it. And then a bunch of attachment comes up, a bunch of ego comes up. And so we have to be really careful while still acknowledging that each of us has certain expertise that could be of benefit to others. So one of the ways that I found to be unbelievably helpful in kind of mitigating becoming isolated in that process is to be really collaborative with internal folks. So I spend a lot of time with sport coaches, a lot of time with the strength coaches, just a lot, like I was on the road last week with our volleyball team. So just like little conversations with the athletes to hear like, well, how are you using this? What's an issue that you have over here? Like what's going well over here? So that constant conversation definitely helps as well. But in terms, and you said this a few moments ago around, you know, like, do some people like sit in the back of the room and say like, what the hell is this, right? Like, absolutely, right? There are some people that have that attitude. I would say it's a very small minority of people. I'd say there's probably like 50% of the people that immediately are like, love it, great, like looking forward to doing more. And then there's, 30, 40% that are like, it's good, I like it, not a bad thing to do. And then there's a small, leftover, 10% that are like, you know what, like not my jam. And I think we have to be okay. I have to be okay with that. Anyone in this work has to be okay with that. Like, it's not going to be for everybody. I think it's a really, really bad idea to make other people meditate. I think it's a really good idea to expose people to what meditation is. So when we do kind of like full team stuff, it's just some exposure. What is this stuff? What are some of the ideas? Get a taste of practice. And then from there, create opportunities for those that want to go deeper to take it deeper.
I love that you bring up exposure. I'm a firm believer in taking conceptual material and applying it. So with all that being said, you gave me literally off the glass alley-oop for a segue here. Are you willing to share with the listeners, or at least just expose them a little bit right now live on the podcast, to what a typical, small session, small taste of meditation training would be like from you?
Absolutely. Happy to. So you want me to lead a small practice?
Let's do it, man. I'm going to go on mute.
Yeah. So I invite everybody to just take a moment to choose a posture first that's going to work for you. And some folks may think you got to be sitting up straight, cross-legged, or some other image that comes up. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You can be in whatever posture works for you. Standing, seated, walking, whatever posture you choose, it is important to bring into it a balance of two qualities. Quality of feeling relaxed, and balancing that with a quality of feeling alert. And your eyes can be opened or closed, whatever works for you. I invite you to begin by bringing your attention to the contact points your body has with the ground or furniture. Feeling the weight, the pressure, the immediacy. Bring your attention to your shoulders, to your jaw, the place where you commonly store tension. And not trying to make anything different, while at the same time allowing things to change all on their own. And in the midst of this awareness of what's happening in your body, letting all the sensations that are happening just unfold, not trying to control them. I invite you to choose to bring your attention to the sensation of breathing. You don't have to go get the breath. The breath is already here. It's more of a resting your attention back onto natural rhythm of your breath moving in and moving out of your body. Giving yourself permission that for the next few moments, all you have to do is be here and feel your body breathing. If it hasn't happened already, it will happen that your mind's going to wander off. The future, the past, some random thought. It's not a problem. The moment you notice your mind has wandered off from your anchor is a moment of mindfulness. It's a moment there's a little space. And in that space, you can choose what to do with your attention. And in this practice, you can choose to bring your attention back to the immediacy of this breath moving in and out of your body. And as you come to the end of this practice, just take a note of how things are. There's no right, there's no wrong, just curious. It's all data, it's all information. Maybe noticing the impact of taking a few minutes to train your mind in this way. When you're ready, if your eyes are closed, feel free to open them. Move your body any way you want.
Thank you, Chad. We are kindred spirits, my man. I appreciate you. That was fantastic. I know the listeners will enjoy that as well. A question that comes up from a lot of individuals who have the opportunity to experience something like that is, well, that was great. That was a formal training that someone was facilitating for me. How does this translate now to my area of expertise, to my performance, as an example? So when these questions come up from student athletes, what's an easy way for them to wrap their mind around, like you said, strength conditioning, reps for the mind, fractional changes? What do you share with them when they raise their hand and say, Chad, excuse me, this is great. I feel awesome. I feel relaxed. I feel focused, but I have practice this afternoon. I can't close my eyes and focus on my breath during practice. So what should I do?
Yeah, I think there's so many ways to build those bridges. So one is, from the strength and conditioning metaphor, you don't get in the squat rack one time and then say, great, like I'm unbelievably strong now, nailed it. I don't have to get in here for the rest of the year, right? It's repeatedly getting in the squat rack where the benefits show up. So this is no different. It's repeatedly getting in the mental squat rack and doing these practices where, we can shift, scientifically what we might think of as, states into traits. We can create, more of a baseline of having these things show up. So that's part of it. Another way that I like to think about it is, we can do these like formal longer practices. I think about them sometimes like base training practices, and that's like the time in the weight room. But we can also intentionally do very quick practices to integrate them into our lives. I think about those as integrated practices. So we could take so many small elements of that practice we just did, and an athlete could bring it into practice. So it could be something as simple as, one part of the practice we just did is we brought attention to the contact points. So an athlete could easily do that when they're taking the floor, right? When they're going out onto the field, right? They could feel the sensations that are happening in their feet, the tingling, the pulsating, the weight, and then go, right? The start of that drill. And that, I think, brings to life. There's this great line from Coach Tom Coughlin, former NFL front office head coach, talks about be where your feet are. So this is actually training to be able to do that. It takes 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and you can kind of bring that right into the midst of competition. So I think we can do both. We can shift things over time with regular training, and we can find ways to bring it right into the flow and midst of training and competition.
That's fantastic. I think it goes without saying, but you can't really talk about mindfulness without talking about the brain. And we've circled around it a little bit, the organ itself. You're working with a very unique population at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the athletics department. We know the demand on student athletes. We know the pressure. We now know name, image, likeness is coming in. So there's a lot happening on a brain that isn't fully maturated. 18, 21, perhaps 22-year-old student athlete. Can you speak to the changes that are occurring when you work with a freshman student athlete
Mhm.
and as they transfer sophomore, junior, and into their senior year, and then releasing them into what I call the wild, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the things, we know like at different times in humans' lives, there's periods of greater plasticity, right? That like the brain is developing kind of at a quicker clip, so to speak, right? And so this is one of them. And so this 18 to 22-year-old range. And so it feels like an unbelievable opportunity to take advantage of this time to train for things like stability, train for things like an embodied sense of purpose, appreciation, noticing the good, and doing it in a context where maybe the near-term goal for some of them is to impact their athletic performance or impact their academic performance. But in 4, 5, 6, 10 years, if they go pro, that, sporting career will be over, but those skills of stability, embodied purpose, appreciation, and all the other things that come with mindfulness and meditation can continue to be supports with them for a really long time. And so that's kind of one part to the response. Also, when you talk about like kind of like freshmen as they come in and then like how they continue to go, man, this is one of the things that really attracted me to want to do the work, especially like in an embedded position, is that I get to know these men and women over the course of years, and just kind of be around, right? Like do a little bit of training. Maybe they tap in to a certain degree. Some of them, all in from the start. Others, just kind of like, testing the waters. And then over time, we get to go a little bit deeper. I mean, the way I think about the work is those like zero entry pools where you kind of like walk into them.
Awesome.
So at the beginning, you want it to be easy. You want it to just be like, well, just step into the pool and it feels good, right? It's like you say, like there's a lot going on for these student athletes. They got NIL, they've got, especially in a place like Wisconsin, like super rigorous academic loads, sport demands are really high. And not to mention all the other things that are happening for every other 18 to 22-year-old in the world with social media and like, so like the world's on fire in many ways, literally and figuratively. And so how to make it refreshing, how to make it easy at the beginning, step in that zero entry pool where maybe they just feel a little more relaxed. Maybe they can just like de-stress for a minute. And that's great. Those are fantastic outcomes. And then be there when a team or an individual is ready to take it a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. And then maybe they start to use it as part of their sleep routine, or maybe they start to do it as, part of their strength and conditioning routine. And then maybe it starts to show up in their relationships academically and their sport. But rather than just kind of like, hear the answers one time, good luck, because that doesn't work. Instead have kind of like relationships that over time can allow to support them and teams to go, where they're ready to go.
I have an inclination, and I'm not sure if you could speak on this, but if you can, are you taking what you're training with these student athletes and then collaborating with Healthy Minds and monitoring these athletes from the research standpoint? That's just a selfish question that I have for you guys at the University of Wisconsin.
Yeah, we are. We're beginning that process. As you know, science is hard. Science takes time. It's slow, and but we're going to get some things off the ground right away. Just we can look at existing data sets to see what sort of changes we've seen in teams that have participated in this training, and then start to develop programs of research. Some of it'll be feasibility and acceptability sorts of research, and then over time we can start to look at piloting curriculum in different places and efficacy trials, and start to do randomized control trials, But one of the things scientifically that's going to require is getting out of the University of Wisconsin, because we're going to have a research pool that is going to be muddied really, really quickly. We already have it, which is a great problem to have. Right? We want, people to be exposed to that. So, I mean, I see the work that we're doing here, and the work that you're doing, like it's going to start to grow in different, athletic environments. And so too will the research need to grow so that there can be collaborative relationships to start to implement this training. So when we look back and, the vision, for this work in 15, 20 years is that it's embedded into athletic training programs in the same way that physical strength conditioning is embedded in today. And in order to do that, we need a lot of things, including, an evidence base that supports not only the benefit of it, but also guides folks to how do they choose what sort of curriculum they're prioritizing.
It's really exciting to hear that you guys are beginning those collaborations, and to see where that will go is even more exciting because you never know, right? And for buy-in to happen at an earlier stage in these student athletes' lives, also from a parental side too, we know that at 17 years old, you're a high school senior who's making those decisions. So ideally and in theory, that will help get some top tier student athletes into various programs, not just at University of Wisconsin or other institutions, but even in lower level Division II, Division III, and perhaps all the way down to the K-12 level. I have a question for you, and it came up with another one of my guests, Michael Urban. He's a senior mental conditioning coach at the IMG Academy down in Bradenton, Florida. And like myself and like yourself, we are acts of service. We give a lot out, right? Our batteries are completely depleted by the end of the day, let alone by the end of the week or by the end of the semester or by the end of the year. So my question is, what do you do to maintain that battery to ensure that, for example, when you work with these three teams today, that you are at your best, you're at your 100% or maybe 99.99%?
That's an unbelievably important question. It reminds me, there's a great teacher who started this group called Mindful Schools, which in like the K-12 mindfulness space is a rock star collective. They do amazing stuff. And his name's Chris McKenna. And one of the things that he says is the intervention is the teacher's nervous system. And so we can think about that from like a K-12 social emotional learning perspective, but like in like your question, like for me or for the folks at IMG or yourself or others interested in this space, like when we show up, yeah, we've got words, we've got concepts, maybe we're like putting some stuff up on the board, but a lot of the teaching is nervous system to nervous system. And if we're not taking time to tend to that, well, then we're hoping things work out. So how do I tend to that? So it looks a lot of different ways. So one is, I have my daily practice, that's always in the mix, in the same way that you probably wouldn't want to go to a strength coach that never works out. You probably want to go work with a meditation teacher who doesn't practice. So I make sure that, that my daily practice is there. Also go on retreat regularly to have that in the mix. That's for me, that's like going personally like that little bit deeper into the pool and kind of getting those resources renewed and continuing to learn. And I also really try to pay attention to it just on a day-to-day sort of way, right? Like what's my self-awareness of where I'm at? And like I mentioned, so this afternoon, I've got 3 teams back to back to back. And normally I wouldn't want to do that. I'd want to create like a little more space, but there's the way I want things to be. And then there's the reality of the way the world works. And so this is one of those times where it's just going to be like, go, go, go. So how do I set myself up early in the day so that I feel completely prepared to be able to go after that? And that may mean, even after our conversation here, maybe I just, lay down on the floor in my office and just do a quick, 15-minute body scan. And maybe that turns into a 12-minute nap because I'm tired. Right. And that's okay. Just maybe that's what my body needs. I mean, one of my first meditation teachers, people often fall asleep when they start to do these practices, especially the more kind of like mindfulness focused practices. And that's not a problem. She referred to it as napitation. That's what your body needs. You're tired. So anyways, for me, just kind of like paying attention to like, where I'm at and what's needed, because I've got a reminder on my phone that burnout is not a badge of honor.
I love that.
Instead, it's a sign of not being able to live a happy, healthy, balanced life and still perform at the highest level.
Wow.
So that's what I'm interested in, right? Like, not only for like me personally as Chad, right? Is like a guy doing my work, you know, as a partner, as a dad, as a community member. I want to show up fully to all of it. And celebrating burnout is not something that I'm interested in doing.
There you go, man. I mean, that's a mic drop right there. I want to ask you, it's the end of the fiscal year. We're about to roll into 2022. But where do you see yourself in 2030? Let's stretch this thing out 8 or 9 years. What are you doing? Who are you working with? What types of practices? How deep are you into that pool? Or have you made full circle and you're back to that zero entry and ready to go into perhaps a different pool?
So my first response is that I'm just excited for the journey ahead, and just excited to see what unfolds. I think there's going to be lots of exciting, interesting things, probably many of which I have no idea what they are. They haven't arisen yet. So I'm excited for that. With that being said, it's good to have a plan. It's good to have some sense of a North Star and what's possible. So some of what I think is possible at a couple different levels. One is, you know, at the University of Wisconsin, that we continue to grow this programming. So that, yeah, there's a director of meditation training, but then there's an assistant director of meditation training. In the same way that there's various strength coaches, we'll have various meditation coaches that can support teams at ever-growing levels. We also need, as we talked about, kind of like grow the research. So collaborate with scientists so that there's a wider growing pool of rigorous scientific evidence happening at these big institutions around these practices, so that I think in 10 years, I can continue to do the work directly, but also hopefully have learned a lot of things to support a new generation of folks that can take the work even further, right? So that I have the good fortune to be in the first person to have the title of Director of Meditation Training in Major Sports, but I can support a whole generation of folks that are interested in, you know, developing new things and making it work in their environments, right? And also while acknowledging my limitations. I mean, I think I have something to offer, but I also have a lot of limitations, some of which is, you know, I'm a white guy, 40 years old, formally educated, cisgendered, heterosexual, and all that stuff shows up with me and has informed me now and will continue to inform me. So how do we make sure that it's not, you know, just a bunch of people with that background that are making decisions? So kind of making sure there's a lot of people at the table as this work rolls forward to meet the varying needs of our unbelievably, you know, rich and complex world.
Man, I don't think you could have said it any better. And I'm a huge believer in everything happens for a reason. And by no accident did I come across your profile on LinkedIn. You know, just seeing the work that you were doing, it really sparked my interest, because sometimes you feel like in this space, if you will, you're on like an island. And then all of a sudden you're looking out to the horizon wondering, are there any other islands out there? And then, you know, clouds clear and you see another island and you swim up to it and you realize, oh, it's not much different, right? And so it's just been a pleasure for me selfishly to have met you. We've never touched palms, obviously, but for this collaboration to continue is a huge honor of mine. I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
No, I mean, Ford, likewise. This is, you know, there's that quiver that we were talking about earlier, like that resonance, right? Where you're just like, oh, this feels good, right? You know, like we're interested in the same things. We're looking in similar directions. And it's, there's not a whole ton of folks that have like depth of practice and kind of depth of scientific rigor that are interested in translating these things for the world. So huge honor of mine to start to get to know you. And I look forward to, you know, many, many more years of it.
No doubt. Thanks, brother.